What's up, guys? We're back with another Super7 TMNT Ultimates review, taking a look at the counterpart to the army builder that we got in Wave 1. So we got the Foot Soldier in Wave 1, which means we are finally, it's only Wave 2, but we're finally getting our Foot Leader. So we've got Shredder on deck today. He, of course, comes in the same style packaging that we see throughout the line so far. So the sort of trapezoidal shaped box. You've got the manhole cover with Shredder's face on it this time around. And then you've got the Turtles logo on the very Foot-inspired purple slipcover. Pop this guy off, of course. And we've got our figure there in that fantastic packaging. So you've got a kind of purpley blue brick motif this time around with the figure there in the window. So you've got your shirtless Shredder in all of his glory. And then you've got windows on the side panels, and then the back of the box has got a bunch of that graffiti artwork style look. And then you've got a write-up for the quote-unquote bad guy leader. So let's do it. Let's pull him out and take a look. And here he is out of the package, the one, the only Shredder, the big bad, the pivotal villain when it comes to the Turtles line. And I mean, really, he's just a heavy hitter in a wave of heavy hitters. And this guy is, in particular, one that I've really been looking forward to, not just because he's Shredder, but because he's this version of Shredder. He very much has the same effect on me as the vintage Playmates Foot Soldier does. Because that thing, for some reason, I don't know, it just pushes all the right buttons for me, and this guy is the exact same way for a lot of the same reasons. He's really goofy looking in the vintage line. He has that stupid squat, like super squat pose, and he doesn't have a shirt on. You know, for whatever reason, Shredder never had a shirt in the vintage line, so, well, at least the first one didn't. And well, that's what we have here. So it's a very weird figure, and I think we're in for more of the same, honestly. A very weird figure that, for me, pushes a lot of the right buttons. He's very familiar, so he's a lot like the Foot Soldier as well. There is some shared parts going on, I believe, as far as some of the leg articulation and engineering goes, but for the most part, I think we've got a pretty cool figure. This guy was, of course, like the rest of the wave, provided for review by Super7, but let's jump right in, see what he can do, see how he moves around. Again, he's kind of familiar territory because he's really, really similar to the Foot Soldier, but one thing that's kind of interesting is something that, well, I didn't really expect to see. So in the vintage figure, he was packaged in such a way that his belt was actually wrapped around his cape, and it sort of cinched it at the waist. And this guy has the same kind of thing, though it's different because, well, he's got a soft goods cape, and it's got a soft goods belt on the outside with a little Velcro patch on the back. You can undo it and take that off. So you get like the mimic look of the vintage packaging where he's got the cape cinched around his waist, but instead of actually giving you a removable plastic belt, they give you this one, which kind of goes more in line with a soft goods cape, and he's got a plastic belt on him underneath. So that's kind of cool. It's one of those weird little things that I wasn't expecting to see from the vintage figure, kind of brought through to this one. So it doesn't really have anything to do with how he moves, but of course we have to take that off to get him fully articulated. So we've got a head up here that can swivel, side to side, rotate. You don't really have too much else. He really can't do much more. He can look up slightly, and then he can look down a little bit. His neck is actually a little bit thicker than you might expect, and it's all, of course, underneath this cape. So there is a neck under there, and it doesn't really allow for him to move too much. You've got arms that go all the way out at the shoulder. You can rotate them all the way around. We've got our bicep swivel, single jointed elbow, and then you've got your hinge and rotation at the wrist. He is very similar, again, to the Foot Soldier in that he does not have an ab crunch. So he is fully sculpted on the torso, and you just have a waist twist. If there is one thing I would really like to see at some point going forward, is maybe something more akin to Mythic Legion's articulation, where we just have like a ball peg at the waist. I don't necessarily need an ab crunch if he has a ball peg, just so I can do a little bit more. I'd love to be able to get him to just sort of hunch over a little bit or shimmy side to side rather than just swivel. So it's very similar to the Foot Soldier, which again is still one of my favorite figures in the line. So it's not like it's a huge thing for me, but at the same time, it might be a nice little improvement. You do have your legs that go all the way out, so you can get them to do the Shredder splits. They kick forward all the way, they kick backwards. You can rotate up there at that ball. And then, of course, you've got your, we've got single jointed rotating knees, so you can swivel those. And then we've got our boot swivel down here, which is hidden behind these pads. And then you've got rocker, you've got hinges at those ankles. So he is, again, very, very similar in construction to the Foot Soldier. The legs really seem to be pretty much the same, except for the inclusion of those pads down there. And then the articulation scheme from the waist up, very, very similar to the Foot Soldier, especially when it comes to how that torso is constructed. Now, as far as the overall aesthetics on this figure, this is another instance of a very, very faithful recreation of the Playmates figure, just made new again. So we've got all of the hallmark kind of oddities of Shredder in full view right now. So to start with, we of course have a normal character this time around. So we've got an actual human. We don't have any kind of robot drones. We don't have a flyman. We don't have a pig guy, and we don't have turtles. We actually have a human. So this is definitely, well, in many ways, just kind of a very unique figure just because of that. But the big thing that has always stuck out to me when it comes to Shredder in the Playmates line is the fact that he has no shirt on. For whatever reason, he doesn't have a shirt on. I don't begin to know how these armor pauldrons are attached to his body. Not really sure how the physics work on that or what he's doing to keep those there. But that was always like the weird thing for this figure, because I mean, it's goofy outside of the fact that he was in that really weird pose also, but he had such a weird look. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all, but it's iconic to me when it comes to this line. When I think of Playmates Shredder, I think of the one that doesn't have a shirt on. So yeah, they've really got it, honestly. There are a few notable changes when it comes to kind of the overall look and feel here. And one of the big things for me is that all of his armor is metallic. So you've got the actual wrist gauntlets here, which have these big spikes. These are actually separate pieces, these big spikes. They are glued on, so be careful. I actually popped one off by mistake. I had to pop it back on, but just word to the wise. I was being too rough with him, I suppose. We've got metallic on the pauldrons up here. There's metallic all over his helmet, and then down here on the knee pads. It is, or the shin guards rather, it is subtle. It's not super bright. It's not chrome or anything like that, but it's going to pick up the light pretty well and have a nice shine. He is very much the same super shredded, no pun intended, Shredder that the Playmates figure is. You know, he's like got a 12-pack going on here. So every muscle is fully defined and very much in full view. All the abs, the pecs, the obliques, all of it. He is a poster child for just physical fitness, and they did a good job of that. There is a subtle shading on him as well, so there's a little bit of a darker skin tone that's oversprayed on top of the musculature. It brings it out just a touch. It's not heavy, but it is there. He's got some very subtle nipples as well, if you are a stickler for that kind of thing. We do have the sculpted belt on here, like I mentioned previously, so you do have this piece here if you want to cinch the cape down to his waist like he comes packaged in the vintage line. You can do that. I'm probably never going to do that, but I do like the fact that it's included. And then he does seemingly share parts with the foot soldier. So the crotch and the thighs, and then probably the feet area as well, the upper part of the shins. This I'm assuming is different. I don't know how this pad is attached, but everything down from the waist down really seems very, very similar to a foot soldier, which is fine for the most part. I really don't have any issues there. He does have a cape, and this is of course just like we saw with say Mum-Ra in the Thundercats line. That's the best one to really kind of compare against. This is the same kind of thing. So prototyped by CJSM, and it's got a wire that runs all through, so you can get it to kind of, you know, hoist it up in the air and show off that super shredded back as well. So it stays really nicely. I have no issues with this. My only one little kind of a nitpick is the way that it's actually kind of centered on the figure, and this is entirely how the vintage figure is as well. He's got this huge triangle of fabric that kind of sits over top of him, and you just kind of have to push it down, and you'll have to form that as well with the wire, but it's exactly how the vintage figure was. So it's one of those things that's like, well, they did what they said they were going to do, so I'm not too upset about it. It's just it's a big piece of fabric that does sit over him, kind of like a bib, and it hides his wrapped neck under there as well, because he's got all the wrappings that are on the gauntlets and the boots underneath of that head. That's part of the reason why he doesn't have the greatest range of motion up there either. Of course, though, his big noggin is probably the most similar thing here when it comes to the vintage figure, and I'm going to do a comparison, of course. But this thing is super spot on, even towards like how the mouth area is really sunken in, and then you've got those eyes that are just sort of staring. He's got a bit of a furrowed brow, but he's just sort of staring. And then the very kind of rounded edge design for the helmet. It's not super menacing or, you know, spiky like anything from the movies or anything like that, or the cartoon really even, but it's very, very much iconic when it comes to the Playmates line. So I think they did a really, really good job of basically just recreating this figure and making him into a non-goofy, squatty pose version of everyone's favorite bad guy. Now, as far as size comparisons go, I figured the best thing we could do to start off with is to finally get all 4 of these from Wave 2 in the same shot, since, well, this is the last figure. So we've of course got Leo here on the left, Shredder in the middle, and Mutagen Man on the right. And the best way to get Bebop in this is to stick him behind everybody, because he is just so massive. So you can see that Shredder is about as tall as Mutagen Man, but he's definitely not as bulky. He is taller by about a head than Leonardo, and Bebop still just dwarfs everybody. I mean, he's an absolutely massive figure. So there is a wide range of sizes when it comes to this line. You can see that everything is very much unique, but they all still feel like they belong together because they all share a lot of that Playmates quirkiness. So I think Shredder looks pretty good. He definitely seems like he's going to be sized up pretty nicely, in particular to the Turtles. Now, as far as some other lines, some similar, some maybe not, let's move all these aside, and we will throw a few others up with him. So let's do, of course, the always standby Mando, and then let's do a Thundercats. So here's Lion-O, Ultimate's Lion-O. So you see that he stacks up pretty good to Shredder. He's a little bit taller just because of that hair, though, which is pretty normal. And let's move Mando aside, and we've got the NECA Rocksteady. And there you go. You can see that he's got a little height on him, honestly, but he, of course, doesn't have nearly the bulk. And then what about a NECA Turtle? Just because I know a lot of folks kind of try to mix and match some of these. So here is the Toon Donatello, and I think that works pretty well, honestly. He still looks like he's got enough size on him, maybe a little bit on the small side, but Shredder is nicely sized. I think he looks really good, and in terms of, well, whatever human characters we do get, I think this is a good idea of what we can expect down the road. But then, of course, we have to talk about other Shredders from kind of the same era. So we've got our Super 7 here. We've got, of course, our NECA comic, the Mirage Shredder. We've got our original Playmates, and then we've got our NECA Toon and our NECA movie. And I mean, there's not a great deal to compare to, as usual with these, because the style is just so different. Of course, these two, there is a direct comparison here. And outside of the fact that we haven't talked about accessories yet, these guys look, I mean, they look almost identical to me in terms of overall design. There are just a lot of, well, aesthetic differences when it comes to how they operate and what they do. Overall pose, I suppose, because, I mean, this guy is just in the weirdest pose possible. But they did a great job of translating this into this form factor. I think it's fantastic. So, you know, we'll talk about the whole eyebrows on the helmet thing here in a minute. But there is, you know, a pretty good size comparison with the rest of them. You can see that the Super 7 is in general larger than the NECA Mirage and the Toon. He's about the same size as the movie figure, though. These two are probably the most comparable. And then, of course, these two kind of share a few similarities when it comes to color palette in a few ways, but everything here is still very different. But I really, again, can't get over just how well this whole goofy thing translates into this. It's really good to see them right next to each other, get an idea of exactly what Super 7 is doing to make something like this into something like this. Now, as far as accessories goes, this is where things, well, at least initially, get really stupid and really goofy, because Super 7 did something they probably didn't need to do, but it's exactly the kind of thing that they do when it comes to this line. So, like I showed with the comparisons to the other Shredders, the vintage Shredder does legitimately have his forehead and eyebrows painted on the brim of his helmet. And, well, they gave us an extra head sculpt to be as vintage accurate as you want it to be. And this, I mean, we all saw the promo pictures and the prototype and everything. It just looked ridiculous, but it looks even more absurd in person. I don't know that I'm ever going to use this, but I can't help but find it funny. And honestly, it's the kind of thing that I like to see in the box, whether I'm going to use it long term or not. It's really fun stuff. And of course, it's trying to keep things as vintagey as possible, and they're definitely doing it. So you've got this option if you want to go the goofy route. We also get another cape, and I guess I forgot that this was included because I don't remember this. So you get a plastic cape, a rubbery plastic cape to replace the soft goods. So just like Splinter has a a plastic kimono to put on, you can do the same thing with Shredder. It actually looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. It's not exactly vintage accurate because, of course, the regular figure, the original figure, had a soft goods cape as well. But it still looks good. So if you don't want to use the soft goods cape, you've got another option. It hangs on him pretty nicely, honestly. And the front little triangle portion that I kind of mentioned previously, it's a non-factor here. It just sits nicely over his chest. So you've got a couple different ways to change him up. We do have have some extra hands to start with as well. So he's got gripping hands on him in the box. You've got a set of fists, and these do have the purple straps that go from the wrist guards as well, all painted on. And then you've also got a set of kind of open palm style pose hands, which is really perfect if you want to get him in that really goofy vintage style pose, because of course he needs this hand to do the pose appropriately. We get the ninja stars and all of the requisite generic turtle stuff when it comes to weaponry. So all the stuff that you get with the turtles you usually got with Shredder as well. So you get the thrilling stars, and then you get all of this stuff as well. So the same stuff we've seen before, brown with silver accents on them. So you got all of these, and then you get his sword as well. This is actually the same sword that Leonardo comes with, same sculpt, but it's got different paint deco. So you've got a kind of dark silver gray kind of color for the blade, and then you've got a darker bronzy gold kind of color for the hilt, and then a black handle, which looks really good. So I'm pretty happy with this. It looks like it belongs in an evil bad guy's hands. And then last but not least, you of course get the vintage style sprue with all of the accessories on it. So you got this one done up in brown with no paint for all of your nostalgic accessory needs. So just like everything else in this line, he does come pretty well stacked. He does come with a few, well, one in particular goofy accessory, but everything else is very much welcome additions in this package. So overall, this is a pretty solid figure. I really don't have a lot of gripes with this one outside of the fact that this is one that I definitely wish had something more to offer when it comes to articulation in the torso area. I feel like at the very least a Mythic Legion style ball peg down there would do wonders for this figure. But otherwise he looks fantastic, and I'm really happy with how well the vintage line is translated into this particular figure. I love the soft goods cape on him. It moves really well. The head sculpt is tremendous, and I mean it's basically the vintage one recreated. Absolutely, so I'm really happy with that. He comes with a great array of accessories, including that really goofy, super vintage accurate head with the painted on eyebrows on the helmet. So really there's not much you could ask for different on this figure. I think he's sized pretty well compared to the Turtles. He looks really good next to Bebop. It really shows how menacing they've made that figure, because Shredder is just a regular guy, so it makes sense that he's not humongous compared to some other figures. So he's going to go up really well against the bad guys, and I think he's going to look really good fighting your Turtles. So that's going to do it for this look at the Super 7 Ultimates Shredder. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.